Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Julian. I'm the programming director, and I want to welcome you to this morning's panel that we're calling what are we calling it? The Challenges of Independent Indie Film Production. So we've invited a group of filmmakers that are here at the festival this year, and what I'd like to do is just run down the line and hopefully remember everybody's names, and then I'll let Steph Argy, who's our illustrious moderator, who's had 3 films in the festival, one of which was filmed in Port Townsend, and I'll let her tell you about that. But our first panelist is Alexandria Bombach, and she's here with her short film Common Ground, and she's also our first artist in residence person that is here editing her feature-length documentary Frame by Frame. Next to her is Sean Mullin, and he's got a new film, a feature film called Sam and Mirra that just got picked up by Draft House. Is it Draft House Films? And they're changing the name for the theatrical to be Mirra and Sam, which is alphabetically more advantageous, but it's going to be harder to roll off the tongue. And next, and he has to duck out to go to a Q&A in about 11 o'clock, so we'll try and give him attention before he has to go. Sylvia Caminer, she's the producer of Grace, and she's done quite a few films. Besides that, I've seen one documentary that she did about Rick Springfield, which was awesome. And it was, I mean, believe it, I kind of went, really? But when I saw it, it really won me over. And so that's where we met in Nashville, where that screened. And there's Steph Argy, who's our moderator. Next to her is Mirra Bank, who's the director of The Only Real Game, a really cool documentary about baseball. And I'm a sucker for sports documentaries, so it was a slam dunk for me. So, a home run. Out of the park. Out of the park. Totally. So next to Mirra is Tessa Bell, and she's the producer of the Life Inside Out. And next to her is Bernard Attal with a feature film called The Invisible Collection, which I also saw at the Nashville Film Festival. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll turn it over to Steph.
Let's see, is this on too? It sounds like it. All right. Well, thank you all. This is a really interesting mix of filmmakers and filmmaking types on the panel, because we have documentarians and we have narrative filmmakers. So I think we can learn a lot. So my first question, I think, would be one of those run down the whole panel questions, which is my question. I've always found on our productions, there's always something that comes along that's the surprise. That's the quicksand. They're the challenges that you anticipate. But on your most recent project, is there anything specific that really took you by surprise? That was the unusual challenge or the singular challenge about that particular project? I just thought it'd be interesting to start with a specific thing. So, should we go down the line? Yeah.
Well, I guess right off the top of my head, I guess I'm working on a feature-length film right now called Frame by Frame that's about Afghan photojournalists and kind of this media revolution within the last 10 years and their fight for free press in Afghanistan. And we were there for 6 weeks in October, and I think what the biggest challenge was, I guess, was just kind of absorbing everything that was, and trying to find the things about Afghanistan that we were not used to seeing, and being able to recognize those and film them as a part of the story. So we went to a peace concert where there were musicians playing and things that you wouldn't expect, that are like professional rap stars in Afghanistan and things like that, but just not missing a beat in that set. But producing challenges like as far as like being able to communicate with people was a big challenge. Translations, getting permissions was a big challenge. But what I found was really great was actually being women was a lot easier than being a man in Afghanistan, because you get access to both women and men. And so that was a great part of it. But I can only think of benefits right now. I'm trying to think of challenges.
Half the stories are
Wow, you're in Afghanistan, no challenges. I was in New York City. I barely made my movie. The fuck is my problem? Yeah, challenges. I'm waking up, and getting there, and not everything. We shot in New York City. We shot over 16. It's a feature film. It's a love story about an Army veteran and an Iraqi immigrant in New York City. They kind of have this unlikely romance, and so we shot in New York City. And I mean, on day one, my actress, she was a grad student at NYU at the time, and I think just for talk about challenges, I mean, I think every day we had a challenge, but on day one, she was a little nervous, I think, a little anxious, and she's a fantastic actress. She's wonderful in the movie, but she took her contacts. She, instead of putting the cleansing thing, I don't know how contacts work. I've got an eye phobia. We can talk about that later. But she put the cleaner in there or something and put it in her eye. And she had a corneal abrasion. Am I saying that even right? So she was rushed to the hospital. Am I saying that right? Yeah, I'm saying it right. So on day one, my actress is in the hospital. And I'm like, shit, because she's I can, by the way. Is this you guys all 18? I am? All right. Fuck, that's great. So, I mean, half my movie is a Mirra, and she's gone. So I put my assistant in a hijab and a head thing, and we shot over her shoulder. We shot all the scenes of my lead actor, Martin Starr, who plays the lead, and he wasn't happy because he's like, your assistant can't fucking act. And I said, fuck again. I'm hungover. And so, yeah, that all happened on day one. But we made it, we stayed positive and made people laugh. Laughter, to me, the most important thing is making people laugh and feel comfortable. A light fell on my head on day one, too, and that didn't make... my lead actor was very scared after day one. But by day 6 or 7, we won him over, and I have many more war stories to tell you if you like. But that was, your actress in the hospital. Oh, cool. Sorry.
Wow. I was going to tell a story about my lead subject being kidnapped in Tanzania, but I think instead I'm going to talk about on Grace, the lead actor. He's supposed to play like the romantic lead. He's supposed to be like, gorgeous, and she falls for him instead of when she's in recovery, and the last thing you're supposed to do is get involved in a relationship, and he becomes her new addiction. So on about day 3, I start to notice all these like blotches on his face. I'm like, what is going on? He'd gotten sun poisoning. And he literally, his face, I was like, oh my God, it was horrific. Like his whole, I've never seen anything like it. And his whole face. So we were like, oh my gosh. So we had to reschedule the entire movie basically because we couldn't do we did a day on the beach, which is like their first like moment. And so we just had to shoot. And the whole crew is like, oh my God. I had to convince them that he would get better and we'd actually have a movie. So we just had to shoot over his shoulder the same. And it took a week, for it. He was we sent him to the doctor a couple times. He was on strong medicine, and it didn't help because I think he still went out surfing, which wasn't great. But yeah, so there's always something.
That makes documentary filmmaking sound easy. No actors.
Well, except if you're shooting in Manipur, which has been under martial law for 60 years, it's almost impossible to get in and out of Manipur. And once you get there, it's, although it's considered a very troubled place and a place with a lot of danger, I have to say, having been there 5 times on our shoots, I never felt in danger, but every single time the permit situation, until very recently, was that even if you were an Indian citizen, Manipur is on the border with Burma, and it's part of the northeastern states in India. It would be as if you here in the state of Washington had to get a permit from Washington, D.C. to go to New York. You had to get a special visa. So the sort of travel restrictions were extreme. And once you get there, there are very few paved roads. There's very unreliable electricity, internet. Forget about, sanitation issues. And one of the things about baseball in Manipur is that they were carving their own bats. They had no gloves, and they certainly had no safety equipment. So not quite the first day, but almost the first day, our wonderful sound person, I had a Manipuri crew, and Sunil, who was great, was following our American DP, and suddenly there's a crack of a ball, and we turn around and Sunil is down flat, and a foul ball, because there was no backstop, nothing to protect him, hit him in the eye. And we wound up with him in the hospital for several days. But the first night out, or the second night, when they were able to get an x-ray done, they then were doing eye surgery by flashlight in the hospital. And it was, how shall I say, it was an eye-opener about not getting hurt, not getting sick in a place like Manipur. But the really great surprise was that the women turned out to be the people who were the engine that drove baseball, as well as this very interesting nonviolent peace initiative in Manipur. So we may talk about that more later. But sort of the extremes of how difficult things were, and yet how resourceful and how nuanced people were about dealing with it. It's very interesting.
Challenges. You know, you sort of get into this business because you like challenges, or you're in the wrong business, and there's so many challenges that. My favorite from that particular shoot, and it was a 15.5-day shoot, so there's not a lot of time for accidents to impact your schedule, because you've only got 15 days, and we were on such a small budget that I made the producerial decision not to. Who was at the screening last night? Because I'm going to tell this story again. Nobody was at the screening. Great. Okay, good. So we made. Oh, it's screening at 12:15 today. Life Inside Out. Come see it. We made this decision to. I made the decision not to get a permit for LA. We spent a lot of our money on permits in Monrovia, which was very expensive, and we had to bribe a bunch of all of the businesses up and down the street in Monrovia, so that took my entire location fee budget. And I thought, well, we're paying for the club, so we're covered through the club, sort of, and we just won't get the LA permit, because that's the only place we need a permit. We had 3 days in the club. It was a massive component of the project, and the lighting took somewhere around 6 hours. So we had 6 hours of lighting and 6 hours of striking, and two and a quarter days in between to actually film what we had to film. And we were flying out one of the musicians from Tennessee, and he only had 1 day. So on the second day at noon, one of my PAs comes up to me and says, "There are some cops outside." So so I went outside, and that day I was one of the extras, and I had on red high heels and a hot red dress, and I don't know what I look like, but not a producer. In any event, I walk up to the cops, and they're like, "What can we do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the producer." And they were like, "Yeah, okay. Well, we need to see your permit." And I was like, "Well, I'm sure we have of course we have a permit. Where's my permit? Would somebody please go get my permit, please?" I spent 45 minutes outside talking to the cops about their children and my children and the neighborhood and what was going on, how terrible, and that people don't get permits. It's just, I have one, it's just coming. And so he calls the permit office, and they don't have a permit on file. And I just, because they're filming. And I got this guy from Tennessee, I have him today, and that's it. So I just kept going and going, didn't tell the director, didn't tell anybody inside what was going on. And finally, after about 45 minutes, he said, "Listen, we're coming in." And so they walked in, and the director nearly had a stroke. And they walked around, and they said, "Okay, we're going to give you an hour to shut down. And if you're not, we're coming back. And if you're not shut down, I'm taking you." And he pointed to me in my red high heels to jail. I thought, jail in red high heels is not going to work for me. So, anyway, they left, and I turned to my director and I said, "Okay, I want you to continue to shoot. Do not stop shooting. We're going to put a PA on this corner and a PA on that corner, and we're going to run 2 PAs back and forth from the studio to the truck with lights, same lights, back and forth, back and forth. So there's an appearance of we're trying to move. In the meantime, you guys have got to shoot this guy from Tennessee that we only have for today." And she was like, "Oh, no, I don't." I said, no, you got to do that. So anyway, that was the challenge. And then we didn't end up shooting this one guy one musician had to go back to Yugoslavia, so we couldn't get him for the postponed day that we ended up going back into the thing. So we shot, I can't tell you that. Anyway, you got to go and see the movie. It was a great challenge.
Well, as you said, I mean, making film is always facing many challenges. So the film which I present here was shot in Brazil, and the main challenge in Brazil is to be able to keep the crew small, because they like to add up people, and the assistant like to hire an assistant, who like to hire an assistant, sometimes on their own money, or sometimes not even paying. So. And after a while, so you end up with a big crew, and you don't know. You end up not knowing some people, and it's more difficult to get the crew focused on what you want to do. So that's the main challenge. Now we had quite of an issue before filming, because in the film there are two important actors, and one of them was a quite known actor in Brazil. He was the first one that I cast. And he always said that he loved the screenplay and he wanted to do that part, and it was the best part he had been proposed in a while. And then I found out that he didn't want to rehearse, and that he had some issues with rehearsing, and that he was like piling on. And I wanted absolutely to have the actors rehearsing for a couple of weeks, and he kept piling up other commitments. And I don't know what was the issue with him. I don't know if he just didn't like to rehearse, or if he really had those other commitments. And he made the rest of the team uncomfortable, because it's difficult to demand from some of the actors to rehearse and exempt one in particular to do so. So we had to make the difficult decision to fire him from the film. So he was very upset, and to this day he demolishes me. And we found another actor, and actually it proved to be a very important move for the film, because he so at that time we were I think it was like maybe 2 weeks before the shoot, so we were very, very troubled and very concerned. But I think what we learned is that those kind of accidents, you have to welcome them, because sometimes they add up to the film.